Let us begin. My name is Darren Joseph, HJ Tax. We're a team of cross-border tax advisors that seek to demystify the sometimes confusing world of international tax for those of us who are trying to live that international lifestyle. Today, we have the honor and the privilege of speaking to the one, the only, Mr. William Fung. Bill, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you. Again, my name is William Funk. I'm a tax attorney, member of the firm Norris McLaughlin, and I do. I have a fairly broad tax practice, which covers such things as cross-border, tax planning for corporate transactions, as well as partnerships, personal matters, state and local, and I also deal with civil tax controversy. So it's a fairly broad tax practice.
Everybody watches movies and everybody's on Netflix, right? And there's this perception or this idea, that there's such a thing as a trust, and you just set up this magical thing and all your tax problems just poof, they just go away. So, that's my experience. People just, they get on calls, just like you, and insist on paid consult. I really don't have time for freebies as well. And so part of their opening salvo, can you tell me about a trust? I heard that that's going to solve all my problems. What is your experience dealing with trusted foundations with pre-immigration planning, and how do you advise around that?
The thing that you mentioned before, I don't deal with gift and estate taxation, so I deal very little with trusts. I simply have an awareness that if they exist and if that they're cross-border gifts, that there's going to be sort of significant U.S. reporting requirements, and so the thing that I would simply caution is that be aware that that reporting is serious, because the penalties for non-compliance can be quite substantial. And so I actually sort of dealt with a case where that actually this really sort of wasn't the taxpayer's fault. This is a taxpayer who's living in a country somewhere in the Pacific. I will not say where, but where that there's a local advisor who's saying don't worry about when you can get the information to me. If we have to file late, we'll file late, rather than sort of pushing, let's get the information that we have. Let's file at least something and amend. If that there's additional information, and where that as a result of those continued late filings and of so leading the taxpayer on sort of on a garden path, that there were close to $500,000 in penalties. It's a wrangle with the IRS about, and while I've gotten those down significantly, that there's still a nasty chunk that had to be paid, and I'm still sort of trying to claw some of that back. There have been some interesting cases recently that have gone against the IRS in this area, that have given practitioners some tools. But still, again, the thing that I want to emphasize is that that putting things in a trust it doesn't mean that then goes away and and disappears. Anything that's going to be valid in the United States that is going to require significant reporting, and I'd say that really just to watch for those for reporting, particularly on items that don't necessarily have an income component to them, and so that it's sort of very easy to think, well, all right, that this isn't generating income, so this is not something that the IRS is going to be interested in. Whereas that's actually the statute works the other way around, which is that since that there's no means of picking up tax penalties on this because there's no additional tax, and we were very concerned about people sort of stashing money overseas and not reporting income from it later, that we're going to impose these gargantuan penalties for the for failures of reporting.
Mm-hmm.
that have enabled this.
Mm-hmm.
So this is something very significantly to keep in mind. So I'm not going to advise about
Mm-hmm.
how trust should be used. I do deal with tax exempt matters, and so advise, for instance, on private foundations versus public charities. But
Mm-hmm.
again, the point that I'll make is that particularly with respect to reporting of non-U.S. assets, that the penalties can really mount up. And put in some further context,
Mm-hmm.
that that U.S. lawmakers are really unsympathetic in this,
Mm-hmm.
in this area, because they feel
Yeah.
as though, well,
Yeah.
that if that these are, sort of, whether that's non-citizens who don't vote, or sort of really wealthy people who've been holding money overseas,
Mm-hmm.
that unless the lawmakers are getting contributions from those people specifically, that they think, all right, the penalties are kind of free revenue that they don't have to acquire by imposing taxes generally, which would be unpopular. They can say, we're just imposing penalties on those really rich bad people, and
Mm-hmm.
that you have to be so careful about inadvertently stepping into a category where that there are people who have assumed the worst about you because they have a financial incentive to assume the
Mm-hmm.
worst about you.
Right. And that's an important point that you raised, that, I tell clients this all the time, that when it comes to the US tax code, it's a bit counterintuitive. You'd think it's about revenue collection, but a lot of the code, especially on the international side, it's really about disclosure and data, and, providing, basically everything that they require is super important. And we know that the IRS seems to value disclosure over payments because of the penalties. When you look at the penalties for not disclosing foreign investments, foreign assets, especially foreign financial assets, they are pretty aggressive compared to, not paying your taxes. But just basically to speak to your point, the other point you raised on trust, I mean, you're absolutely correct. I mean, generally speaking, all the so-called loopholes that you see in movies, they've to a large extent been plugged like decades ago. This is like, it's really for Hollywood, leave that behind. What trusts are really about is asset protection and probate avoidance. And we probably, as you said, we won't get into that in detail here. And we've had several articles on our website on trust versus foundation. The trust is more or less a relationship, quite common in common law jurisdictions. So former British colonies, and you have foundations that really are more popular in civil law jurisdictions, particularly Europe and certain parts of Asia and South America, Latin America especially. So, those are tools that one must use sparingly, and you'd probably want to definitely have a detailed consult with someone who understands, because the implications on both sides, both where the assets are held outside of the US and within the US, could be pretty extensive. In addition to which, there's some jurisdictions that don't recognize it. So, for example, there are many civil law jurisdictions that haven't signed the requisite convention, so they simply don't recognize trust. For example, we find that with Spain and Portugal.
And by the way, there actually is a true good faith theoretical foundation to requiring all of the disclosure. So I mentioned like some of the self-interested things from the U.S. point of view about really unsympathetic targets of penalties, but there is an actual public policy that's involved, and the public policy is that if you have U.S. people who are whether from investments or from active businesses earning considerable amounts overseas, the thing that you don't want from a U.S. point of view is that if they just sort of stash the money in a trust, and then at some point later actually a lot of it should be paid currently, but even to the extent that it doesn't need to be paid currently, the money just starts to show up in the U.S. And because that's deemed to be a gift or something else, somehow that it avoids taxes. And so by tracking where that money is being kept, then that when it shows up in the United States, and for instance, when it buys assets in the United States, that there's a history to it. So that's why that it's an important thing to track.
Right.
So if you're a 6, 7, or 8-figure investor, entrepreneur, or business owner who needs a tailor-made solution from a qualified team of professionals, we can help you achieve the international lifestyle, the freedom, and even the tax savings you're looking for. Visit us at htj.tax and live that international life.